What is poppin', Capital City family? If you are new around these parts, first of all, welcome. My name is Scott. This is the Thursday Daily Devo for Capital City Baptist Church. So I hope that you enjoy and get some blessing out of it today. Well, we are still in the book, A Beautiful Outlaw by John Eldredge, in which he explores the person and personality of Jesus without letting all that religious fog get in the way and cloud our view of him. Today we're going to be looking at the scandalous freedom that Jesus has and offers to us. What makes this freedom so scandalous is that it actually is a freedom from an out-of-control, self-serving religiosity that only benefits the institution rather than being representative of true honor, reverence, and worship of God. We are going to be reading in a couple of different passages, which I will have linked somewhere around here. It'll either be above in the blurb if you're on Facebook, or below in the description if you're watching this on YouTube. If you click on those links, it'll take you right to the passage that we are reading out of. And so I would encourage you to pause the video here, go and read the passages. We're going to be in Matthew 8, 1 through 3, and also Matthew 12, 1 through 8. Pause the video, read the passage, come on back, and we will chat about them. Well, the story of the leper and Christ always gives me goosebumps. As John Eldredge writes in the book, lepers were considered to be untouchable. They had to wear torn clothes, they had to keep their hair unkempt, they had to be identifiable, and as they walked through town or a populated area, they had to shout out, "Unclean, unclean, unclean," just so somebody wouldn't accidentally touch them and they themselves become unclean. They also had to wear a covering over the lower part of their face for the rest of their lives. And we just complain about having to wear a piece of cloth over our faces just to go into the grocery store. Maybe you can remember the isolation of quarantine and just how starved you were for social interaction. I know I was. As an introvert even, I was starved for social interaction. But this was the life of a leper. They had to live outside of town, and they had to live alone. They didn't get social interaction. And so here this leper comes, the epitome of what we would call a social pariah, comes right up to Jesus and humbly asks him for healing. And Jesus, before he heals him, or even indicates that he will, what does he do? He reaches out and he touches him. This is the first human contact the leper has had since he probably contracted the disease. However, this action, as liberating and freeing as it is for the leper, it was a scandal to those who were watching, especially to those pesky Pharisees that we like to wag our finger and shake our heads at. Because the leper, by definition, was untouchable. But sometimes Christians can act like Pharisees too. I remember listening to a podcast not too long ago, and the person being interviewed was a guy by the name of Richard Stearns. He was the president of World Vision, and he described how in his first year of leadership at World Vision, which is a humanitarian nonprofit, is a Christian nonprofit, he took a trip to Africa in his first year, and he saw firsthand the devastation wrought by the AIDS epidemic in impoverished African communities and orphanages. He spoke of how children had to bury their own family members, parents, siblings, right outside of their little hovels. And every time they came or went or left home, they had a very visceral, visual reminder of the tragedy and trauma that they experienced. He came back to the States, and he sat down with his board of directors, and he told them that World Vision needed to spearhead the relief effort to African children and families who were suffering from the AIDS pandemic. But because AIDS has such a stigma in America, it's associated with drug use and sexual impropriety. He had to pull teeth to get his board to agree to help. He even experienced some churches and Christians threatening to pull donations if they gave help to these children that were suffering from AIDS or were orphaned by AIDS. For Christians 20, 30 years ago, and maybe even in some places today, those with AIDS, like our leper, are untouchable. And how does Jesus respond to untouchables of society? He reaches out and he touches them. And we're called to imitate him. Now, in the second story, Jesus' disciples are hungry, and so they go out, they start picking grains of wheat in a nearby field for a snack. There's only one problem. This happens to be on a Saturday, which is the Sabbath, and as any good Sunday school student knows, Jews don't go working on the Sabbath, and picking grain on a Sabbath, that constitutes as work. And so the Pharisees, they get all hot and bothered, and they go up to Jesus and they complain. And how does Jesus respond to these folks? He says to these Bible scholars and pastors, he says, have you ever read the Bible? You know that part when David and his men were hungry and they were at the temple or the synagogue, and they had the showbread in the temple, and they ate that. Remember that? Well, it was wrong for David to do that, technically, by the letter of the law, but y'all don't hold it against them, so I'm not going to hold it against the disciples for picking grain on the Sabbath when they just want a little something to eat. Jesus says, man was not created for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was created for man. The Sabbath was designed to be a day of rest for God's people, but the religious leaders created so many buffer rules to keep folks from breaking any part of the Torah or the law that it became really serious, tedious work to observe the Sabbath, the day of rest. Sometimes we like to think that we are above the attitudes of the Pharisees, but a lot of Christian institutions, they create similar buffer rules. I had a friend who attended a very fundamentalist missionary school back in the day. He had to sign a contract saying that he would not go watch movies, he wouldn't play cards, he wouldn't listen to any secular music. Some Christian colleges make you sign a contract saying that you agree not to drink any amount of alcohol, either in public or at home. Maybe you can remember a time in your life when Christians claimed that it was a sin to read comic books or to dance or to, like I said, play cards. I can remember being told as a kid that reading Harry Potter or watching Pokemon or even, goodness forbid, the Smurfs was sinful. Christians are just as inclined as Pharisees to turn non-sins into sins. Eldredge writes of a friend who attended a Bible college that required him to go to 3 chapel services a week, one on-campus Bible study, and then they were strongly encouraged to be a part of and attend a local church on Sundays. And that's on top of all of the other studies and homework and stuff that they had to do for the college. This is what he writes on page 87. He says, furthermore, Jesus makes clear that the Sabbath was made for man, not the other way around. In other words, we don't serve the Sabbath serves us. My friend chose not to attend church on Sundays. This was met with frowns and suspicion. He was dismissed as a marginally committed Christian. This is ridiculous. Religious activity, drunkenness, gluttony. These students were overloaded with extraordinary demands of study. Daily homework was a millstone hung around their necks, requiring them to labor way into the hours of every night. Sleep deprivation was a standard on campus. If anyone needed a day of rest come Sunday, it was these beleaguered disciples. Rather than lifting the workload on Sunday, the college culture added yet one more duty, thus violating the spirit of the law while pretending to honor it. This is a very mild example of how suffocating religious institutions can become. So, how do we apply this? Have you ever been hurt by religion? Or thought that you were untouchable? That no matter how much you did, you just couldn't get it right, and you were unworthy to even step into a church. I remember I had a friend in the Army who I would invite to come to chapel with me, and he wouldn't go. He just said, I'm not going. I'm not good enough. You know, I'm going to go to church, and I know everybody is going to look at me and they're going to judge me. Maybe you've had that experience. Maybe you have actually legitimately been judged by Christians for being less than or not holy enough. Maybe you try really, really hard to check all of the boxes and do all the religious chores, and you still don't feel like you've done enough. Well, if that's you, I'd like you to close your eyes for a moment and just imagine Jesus reaching out to you, putting a hand on your shoulder and saying, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Jesus comes to give us rest. We can have lists and lists and lists of religious chores that we have to accomplish, but at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is, did you put your faith in Christ? Did you accept Jesus to come and purify you? Because he's going to do all the dirty work. You don't have to do the work. Jesus is going to do all the work for you. And you're just along for the ride through the process of sanctification. I hope you found rest in those words that I read from Matthew 11, 28 through 30. If you don't have a relationship with Jesus, I'd like to encourage you to contact the church, reach out to us. We would love to explain to you how to come to Christ and what it means to be a Christian. And in a nutshell, it just means surrendering yourself and saying, "Jesus, I give up. I know that I can't, there's nothing I can do to make my way to you, but thank you for making your way to me, and I want you to come into my life and start that process of sanctification and making me right, in right standing in your eyes." That's all you got to do. Please contact the church. We would love to get to know you. We'd love to learn how we can minister to you and walk with you along these steps in becoming a Christian and following Christ in faith. Well, have an amazing rest of your week, church family, and God bless you.